If you ask most computer programmers what a function is, they're probably going to start out talking about something like this. Something really complicated that has a lot of variables, a lot of moving parts, a lot of things that happen when this function operates and is called, and some very, very complex logic that goes on inside the function. But I don't want us to think about functions in this way. I think it's better to think about what functions are by thinking about what they do and how they operate. Conceiving of functions in this way lets us understand what they really are at their core and how we can use them to make our lives easier when programming in Docassemble. Let's think about functions as machines that do a specific task. A watch, its job is to tell time. A whistle, its job is to make a noise when you put air in it. And this thing, its job is to play music whenever you push its buttons. Docassemble comes preloaded with several functions that you can take advantage of to make your interviews a little bit easier to code and to do handy things for you. One example is writing the date that it is today. The most straightforward way of writing the date is simply to write the date in text, but then when it becomes tomorrow, that date will be wrong. So Docassemble gives you a function called today to be able to do that easily without having to change the date every day. You'll see here I've got a YAML file called Intro to Functions, and I've started the framework for one question. In order to use the today function, I'm going to just code it in. Remember that the $ and curly braces means that I'm inserting a variable or the result of a function. To call the today function, I just write out today and then open and close parentheses. These parentheses are Python's way, and therefore Docassemble's way, of telling the system that you're calling a function. I'll need to also add in a mandatory code block. And then I'll hit save and run. Where we had today, Docassemble inserts August 1st, 2022. That means the value of the today function is whatever date it is today. Just like the watch in our previous example, the today function is simply a little machine that tells you what the date is whenever you call it. For example, if you called the today function tomorrow, it would tell you whatever date it is tomorrow. Another way functions make your life easier in Docassemble is by building automatic lists that you can use over and over. You'll see here that I've written out a question, what state do you live in? And then one field, your state, state choice, which defaults to a text input field. When I run this interview, I get a text input field, which means a user could put anything they want to in that field. Not a very useful thing to have. It's better and more useful to have the users pick from a list of states and therefore be limited to the kind of data that they can put in the interview. But to do that manually, it would take a long time. Something like this. And so forth. Instead of having to do that over and over, Docassemble gives us a shorthand way to do that with the states list function. To call that function and to populate the options for my state choice question, I just need to code it like this. By calling states list, it will automatically populate a list of values for each state. I'll hit save and run, and I get a nice pull-down menu with all of the names of the states there for me. So let's pause here for a quick review. So far we've seen that functions can be used to 1. Insert a dynamic value, like what today's date is. That's the today function that inserts whatever day today is. Functions can also automatically create lists of values for question fields, like the list of states. Instead of coding out each name of each state by hand, Docassemble gives us the ability to just create that list from a function. But there's a third thing that Docassemble functions let us do that's pretty handy in coding interviews, and that's the ability to transform one value into a different value just by feeding it to a function. If we go back to our interview that uses the states list bit of code, you'll notice that when I save and run it and select a state, it says you live in AZ, which is the abbreviation for Arizona. If I wanted it to automatically display the full name of the state, I'd have to do some pretty fancy coding for each state abbreviation. Luckily, Docassemble comes built in with a function that automatically does that for us as long as we feed it the abbreviation for the state. So down here in the end, after you live in state choice, I'm going to code that part in. And I'm going to use the state name function. You'll notice these parentheses come after state name, just like they do in states list. However, for state name to know what it's doing with what, I'll need to feed it the acronym for the state. And by doing that, I'll have it convert that into the full name of the state. So I'll take my state choice value here, copy it, and just paste it inside the parentheses. I'll hit save and run. And once I select a state, you live in DE, the full name of the state is Delaware. Whenever you see a function with these parentheses, many functions can operate with the parentheses being empty. But what the parentheses actually mean is they're the space where you put the value that the function is supposed to do something with. In the case of state name, you have to feed it the acronym, which is state choice in this instance, and then state name is able to digest that and spit out the full name of the state. Going back to our example of the whistle, state name is kind of like the whistle, and state choice is kind of like blowing through the whistle. That's why I think it's easier to think of functions as machines that do what you tell them with the information you give them, instead of super complicated computer programs. So just as a quick recap, functions in Docassemble can be used to insert a dynamic value, automatically create lists of values for question fields, or transform one value into another value. Again, in this video, we're only talking about the built-in functions that Docassemble comes preloaded with. This is simply an introduction to functions as they're used in Docassemble. There's many more things that you can do with functions in Docassemble, including coding your own functions that do things specifically that you want them to do. You can also use functions to scan items, scan QR codes, send emails, send text messages, interact with other web services and APIs, and all kinds of things that you can do with straight Python. So again, I highly encourage you to use functions in your Docassemble interviews because they make your life easier and because they can be reused across your interviews over and over again and give you consistent results. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and check out the other videos which are linked.